Recently, I posted a video about circulation. For the diabetic or anyone with diabetic tendencies, circulation is a big deal. Your circulation just isn't as strong as that of other people. And when you think about circulation, you got to think about feet, because the feet are the farthest part of you from your heart that's pumping that life-giving blood. And therefore, you want circulation to your feet as much as possible. And I talked about some of the ways that can happen. Exercise definitely is probably the strongest thing you can do to increase your circulation. Taking an aspirin that'll thin your blood will also help. And then there's the strange idea of compression socks. It almost seems counterintuitive, because compression socks are very tight on your feet and legs, and you might suppose they would not allow for good circulation, and yet supposedly they're good for it. I don't understand how that works. Maybe some of you can leave a comment and let me know why compression socks work, but they are supposed to work in the area of helping with circulation. But there's one thing I forgot to mention, and I thought I'd mention now, and that is the lowly sandal. Sandals can help with circulation, especially to your feet. How do they help? Well, they help because you don't have to wear socks, and socks typically are a problem for circulation to the feet. Many of you know the experience of you're about to go to bed at night, and maybe you take off your socks and you find that your leg above the sock line is plump and fat, and your leg below the sock line is skinny. And it's like those socks have been inhibiting your circulation, and that's not a good thing. So if you can get away with not wearing socks, you're a winner. And of course, in warmer weather, sandals will do the job. And I highly recommend sandals when you go out, and just house slippers without socks when you're in your home. Now, in the wintertime, when you have to wear socks, or at least you have to keep your feet warm, you might consider house slippers that are very fuzzy and warm looking, and yet you still don't have to put socks on, and they can keep your feet warm. So you got to consider that. And for people that have the least tendency to have bad circulation toward their feet, you ought to consider becoming a sandal wearer. Now let's get on to our regularly scheduled program. This person talks about, he starts out with the words, "on the doctor's defense." And apparently what he was responding to was the fact that I would complain sometimes, or people would complain, that doctors, they just don't have any interest in promoting low carb, and they don't give you any idea that you can get better. So this person says, on the doctor's defense, if he never did see in his doctor's life, in other words, all the time he's been a doctor, if he never did see someone lowering their glucose from 10 to 5, how can we expect him to recommend that? Speaking of a low-carb diet, time-restricted eating, how can he recommend it if he's never seen it? Well, there's a point to that. He says it's like your trainer telling people, if Usain Bolt can run 100 meters in 9.7 seconds, you can too. Well, that I have a little problem with that illustration. He's like, well, you wouldn't expect a trainer to tell you, well, you can do it because Usain Bolt could do it. Well, the answer is no, I couldn't if my life depended on it. If I trained for the next year, 10 hours a day, I couldn't even come close to that. So there are a lot of things in life you cannot do. And it kind of reminds me of Jack Nicklaus one time telling why golf was so popular. He said, if you went to a baseball park and you faced a major league pitcher throwing 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, you'd never get your bat on the ball. And he's right. I'd be scared to death just to face that 95-mile-an-hour fastball coming at me. And he said, if you went to the tennis court and you faced a professional tennis player hitting these monster serves, you'd never get your tennis racket on that tennis ball. But he said in golf, it's a little different, because for most golfers, if they just play 9 or 18 holes of golf, they'll hit 1 or 2 shots that are every bit as good as a professional. And he's right. I've never been a great golfer. I've always loved the game, although I haven't played in years. But I've never been a really good golfer at all. But in almost every round of golf I ever played, there were at least 2 or 3 or 4 shots where I would hit it beautifully. And I would say to myself, that's the secret. You just discovered the secret to really great golf. Just keep doing like you did on that particular shot. So maybe I was 160 yards out and I hit a 4-iron to the center of the green. Just beautiful. Just went up into the air the way it was supposed to, dropped down softly on the green, landed in the middle of the green, not too far from the flag. And I think, Dennis, you just discovered the answer. But of course, the problem is with golf, the consistency's what separates the pros from the hackers. Because I was never able to do it consistently. Yeah, I'd have 2-3 shots. I might sink a 25-foot putt. I might hit a driver down the center of the fairway for 250 yards. And I'd think, boy, you just need to practice a little more, Dennis, and you'll get really good. And it never happened and never would happen. I just didn't have it. But you get the illusion that you can do it. And that's why you keep coming back and you go to the driving range and you play rounds of golf. You've got the idea, I really can do it if I just practice. Of course, it never happens. But here's the good news about beating diabetes. No, I could never match Usain Bolt in running, and I could never match any of the professional golfers in golfing. I can beat diabetes, and I have. And you can too. If you're a type 2, you can get down, almost certainly, you can get way below where you are now in terms of your A1C, in terms of your fasting glucose, in terms of the complications. You may have terrible neuropathy. Your feet hurt so bad at night you can hardly sleep, and you're peeing all night long, and you're thinking, is there any hope? And the answer is yeah. You don't have to be anybody special. You don't have to be a Dennis Pollock, not that I'm special anyway, but you don't have to be some YouTube guru who talks about diabetes. You can be just you, just Joe or Mary or Susan or Billy Bob or whatever your name is, just you. And you can beat diabetes. You can whip that sucker and get down to normal levels or close to normal. Now, when you're 75, it'd be unrealistic to expect you're going to get down to the level you were when you were 22. So I'm not saying absolute perfection according to a 22-year-old. But for your age, you can whip that and you can get below the diabetes markers of 6.5. Most type 2s can get into the 5s. And I'm hearing from type 1s, they get into the 5s as well. Now, they, of course, have to take insulin. So you might say, well, that's not beating diabetes if you have to take insulin. But that's just the reality of type 1 diabetes. Of course, you have to take insulin, but you don't have to take nearly so much. The point I'm saying is, the encouraging thing is, no, we can't match up with Usain Bolts of this world or anybody else, the athletes, but we can sure whip diabetes. So, he's trying to defend the doctor saying, well, they never saw it, so of course they can't recommend it. I get that. I guess if I was a doctor and I knew nothing about what it is to reverse diabetes and get your numbers down, I would assume that nobody could. But there are so many testimonies out there these days, and if you don't believe that, just read some of the comments under my videos on my channel, and there are many other channels as well. There are so many testimonies that if a doctor at least has his eyes open a little bit and does a little investigation, does a little checking, does a little reading, he'll quickly conclude this thing can be whipped, this thing can be reversed to the point where the complications leave, the ones that can be reversed, and most can. You know, I had terrible arthritis in my fingers when I was in my late 40s, and it hurt to shake a person's hand. And that left. I was taking the various over-the-counter things, supplements to supposedly help. They didn't help much, but boy, as soon as I went low carb, the pain was gone. I might have a twinge once in a while, but that's it. And I can remember thinking when I was in my 40s, if I'm this bad now, at 48, 49, what in the world will I be in my 60s? Well, now I'm 71. And that's all gone. And I could name a number of other things. If you followed our ministry and YouTube channels very long, you know that we're involved in many different missions and ministries. We sponsor our popular African Jesus Conference, which is a video series of 20 different video Bible studies and teachings to train African ministers about the paramount importance of teaching and preaching Jesus, as well as personally abiding in Jesus. Benedict and I create YouTube videos of our Bible studies, and we also produce audio podcasts of these studies. I teach a weekly video devotional on all kinds of Bible topics. We sponsor free medical clinics in Africa, along with providing needed food and clothes for African widows and orphans. We need your help. Please consider donating through our link in the description below this video. The Support Beat Diabetes link is a personal gift to Benedict and me for our work in diabetes education, and the Spirit of Grace Ministries link is a way of donating to our ministry efforts in teaching the Word of God to the nations and blessing the people of Africa.